Next, exercise 11. So here we are given two normal subgroups N and M of a group G. We have to prove that their product is also a normal subgroup. Note that from a previous exercise we already know that Nm is a subgroup of G because N is normal and M, although normal, it's after all a subgroup of G, so Nm is a subgroup of G, and that is precisely exercise 3. So by exercise 3 above, Nm is a subgroup of G. We now have to prove that it is normal in G. So let G be any element in G, N be any element in N, and M be any element in M. These two elements will help us form a general element in Nm, which will be small n, small m. And with the help of this G, we will then have to show that G Nm G inverse belongs to Nm. That will prove that Nm is a normal subgroup of G. Then this is a general element in Nm, so if we show that this belongs to Nm, then we are done. Now note that this product can also be written like this: Gn G inverse, Gm G inverse. That's because this G inverse and G will cancel out, leaving us with this. Since N, M are normal in G, we have Gn G inverse belonging to N. That is because N belongs to N and capital N is normal in G, so this element must belong to N. Like that, Gm G inverse belongs to M, and hence this belongs to Nm. This shows that Nm is a normal subgroup of G. Next, exercise 12. It's a starred one. The solution is somewhat easy. I don't know why there is a star. suppose that N and M are two normal subgroups of G such that their intersection is the trivial group consisting of the identity element. Show that for any n belonging to n and m belonging to m, this is true. Nm is equal to mn. That means we are given two normal subgroups which intersect trivially. Then we have to prove that every element of one subgroup commutes with every element of the second subgroup. So we arbitrarily choose elements from n and m. Okay, now we concentrate on this product Mn inverse, Nm Mn inverse. This is equal to Nm n inverse m inverse, because we already know Mn whole inverse is n inverse m inverse. Okay, note that Nm n inverse belongs to m. Why? Because m is in m, capital M, and capital M is a normal subgroup of G. So Nm n inverse will belong to m. Also, m inverse belongs to m clearly. Since m is in m, its inverse will also be in m. Hence, their product will belong to m. Okay, their product means this one, that means this product belongs to m. Similarly, n belongs to n. N was originally coming from n, and m n inverse m inverse. M inverse belongs to n. Why? Since n belongs to n, so n inverse also belongs to n, and capital N is normal in G, so M inverse belongs to N, and hence their product also belongs to N. We have thus proved that this element Mn inverse, which is equal to Nm N inverse M inverse, belongs to both M and N. But we are given that this intersection has only one element, namely the identity, so this element has to be equal to the identity, and so this implies Nm is equal to Mn. So that's what we wanted to prove. So in any group, if we have two normal subgroups that intersect trivially, then the elements between them, all of them commute. Next exercise 13. If a cyclic subgroup T of G is normal in G, then show that every subgroup of T is normal in G. Okay, so here we are given a group G where there is a cyclic subgroup generated by some single element of G, T, which is also given to be normal in G. Then we have to show that every subgroup of T is also normal in G. Okay. Now we are going to use an identity in writing the solution. So let's just first mention the identity before solving the exercise. We observe the following. For any two elements a comma b in some group and any integer m a b to the power m a inverse is equal to a b a inverse whole to the power m. This integer m can be negative also, but regardless of the sign of m, this identity continues to be true. One can easily prove this. To prove this, you just have to divide the identity into two cases, namely when m is non-negative and when m is negative. When m is non-negative, you can carry out the proof by induction on m, and once you have that part of the proof, you can then attack the negative case, where you can in fact use the non-negative case. It's very easy to and straightforward to prove this identity in this way, and we have in fact used this. Note that we have already used it in exercise 27. Of section 2.5. Okay, now we solve the problem. So let t equal to a. So it is given that t is a cyclic group, so t will be generated by some element of G. A is some element of G. For every G belonging to G, normality of T in G implies there exists an integer I small g, I suffix g. We are using g here as a suffix because it shows that the integer ig depends on g, such that g a g inverse is equal to a to the power ig. Why? You see, since T is normal in G and A being the generator of T, or a generator rather I should say, because T may have other generators also. So being a generator of T, A belongs to T. So if we are taking an arbitrary element from the group and we are forming this product, then normality of T in G would tell us that this product is again an element of T. Again an element of T means this product will be an integral power of A, since every element in T is an integral power of A. That's because T is being generated by A. So that corresponding exponent is being taken as Ig, and this Ig will change depending on G. You keep changing G, you will possibly get different Igs. Okay. Now let K not equal to the trivial group be any subgroup of T, and we want to prove that this K is itself also normal in G. We are not considering the trivial group because the trivial group is known to be normal in any group. Actually it's a normal subgroup, so there is no need to consider the case where K is equal to E. So K is a non-identity or non-trivial subgroup of T. Then K is equal to this for some positive integer I. We are saying that because K is a subgroup of T, K itself is a cyclic subgroup generated by one such element. But how are we making that claim? This is a consequence of exercise 27 of section 2.5, where we proved that every subgroup of a cyclic group is itself cyclic, and so that means K will be generated by some element in T. Since elements in T are after all powers of A, so there will be a power of A for some positive integer. Why is I positive? A justification for positivity of I can be obtained in the solution to that exercise, where we proved this fact that every subgroup of a cyclic group is cyclic. And another reason for I being positive is that K is not equal to the identity. So you can always choose a positive integer. So this is why exercise 27 of section 2.5. Okay, now we want to prove that this K is normal in G. So we will take an arbitrary element from K, an arbitrary element from G, and then form the required product and show that that product belongs to K. Let G belong to G and A to the power J, or not A to the power J, sorry, K is being generated by A to the power I. So A to the power I is a generator of K. So any element in K will be an integral power of a to the power I. So it will look like this. Where J is an integer. Our aim is to show that this product belongs to K. Now if you apply one of the rules of exponent here in the middle, you have this. Now next we are going to use this identity with ij in place of m, g in place of a and a in place of b. So this identity gives us g inverse whole to the power ij. Note that I and j are integers, so ij is also an integer, but at the same time we have this g inverse is a to the power ig. So again, using that rule of exponent, this can be written as this: a to the power I whole to the power ig times j. Now look at this final element. It's an integral because ig and j are integers, so their product is also an integer. So that means this is an integral power of the element a to the power I. So it's by the very form of this element, it belongs to K. Hence K is normal in G. So that completes the solution. Then exercise 14. Prove by an example that we can find groups E, which is a subgroup of F, which is a subgroup of G, where E is normal in F and F is normal in G. But E is not normal in G. We will provide an example that shows this particular situation. However, to understand the example, we have to wait for some time. It's only when we study the symmetric groups Sn in more detail in section 10 and another counting principle in section 11, then only we will properly understand the solution. For now, let us just write the solution, and the true meaning we will see only when it's time. In G equal to S4, consider the elements. S4 we already know. S4 is the symmetric group of degree 4, which is the set of all, or rather the group of all permutations on a set with 4 distinct elements with respect to composition of mappings as binary operation. However, the elements we are now going to write, they will be in a form that will be unfamiliar. To understand what they mean, we have to get to section 2.10, which discusses symmetric groups in detail. B is this element 1, 3, 1, 3 times 2, 4, and C is the element times 2, 3. So that's why we write C section 210. If you are really curious to know what these elements are, then they are just this. These are supposed to be bijective functions, right? On a set of 4 elements. Say that set is 1, 2, 3, 4. Then A is the bijection that maps 1 to 2, 2 to 1, 3 to 4, and 4 to 3. This is A. Okay, like that. B is the bijection that maps 1 to 3, 3 to 1, 2 to 4, and 4 to 2. And like that, C maps 1 to 4, 4 to 1, 2 to 3, and 3 to 2. You can clearly see that these are 3 different bijections, that is 3 different elements in the symmetric group of degree 4, S4. Okay, now let me just keep it separately. This is not a part of the solution. Okay, this is just for the sake of understanding the elements A, B, and C. However, these notations we haven't got yet. This we will get in section 210. Right now, don't think too much about them. Now let E be the set consisting of the identity permutation and A, and F be the set consisting of E, A, B, and C. Okay. one can verify that E and F are subgroups of G. This can be directly verified, which is particularly easy for E. To see that E is a subgroup, you just have to recognize the fact that if you calculate A square, then you get the identity. So E is nothing but the cyclic subgroup in S4 generated by the element A, whose order is 2. To see that F is a subgroup, you just have to calculate all the possible products and see whether F is closed with respect to them. That will prove that F is a subgroup. Why? Because you recall that in the chapter, in the section on subgroups, we proved that if in a group a finite set is closed with respect to the binary operation, then it is a subgroup. So you can form all the products like A square, AB, BA, all those things, and you will see that each one such product again belongs to F. So that proves that F is a subgroup of S4. Okay. Now comes the question of normality. We want E to be normal in F and F to be normal in G, and we also want E to not be normal in G for in this particular case. Since the first one is rather easy, let's continue from here. Since index of F in E is equal to 2, because you can clearly see that E is a subgroup of F, so E will have an index in F, and that index is number of elements in F divided by number of elements in E. 4 divided by 2, so that is equal to 2. So since this index is 2 from a previous exercise, F is normal in E. Now normality of E in G cannot be so readily concluded. For that we have to go to section 2.11. In section 2.11 we will learn what happens if you form a conjugate of a permutation, where by conjugate we mean this. Say you have two elements A and B in a group G, and you choose an element G in G such that A is equal to GBG inverse, then A and B are said to be conjugates of each other, or we say that A is a conjugate of B. So in this section we learn what the conjugates of a given permutation in a symmetric group are, and that analysis tells us that any element or any permutation that is conjugate to a given permutation has the same cycle structure. Actually the thing is this, you see, let me just tell you what the notation is all about. You, instead of looking at this, you start from this. This is a permutation. There is nothing to, there is no confusion about that. So this is just an ordinary mapping from this set of the first 4 positive integers into the same set, and it's a bijective mapping. It's 1 to 1 and onto. That means it belongs to the symmetric group of degree 4. Okay. Now what we do when we write such an element, we look for cycles. That is, say you start with 1, the image of 1 is 2, the image of, so we start with any one element in the set where the permutation is happening. So we start with one element and then next we write its image, and after that we will write the image of 2. So at some point you will cycle back to the original element here. That happens after 2 itself, because the image of 2 is 1. For that we close it here itself, and we call this a cycle of this permutation. Once a cycle has been found, you then choose an element that has not appeared in the cycle, say 3, and you repeat the process. So this gives you another cycle. This is called a cycle structure that is denoted by 2, 2. This permutation is a product of two cycles. The length of a cycle is the number of elements or number of symbols appearing in the cycle. This is a 2 cycle, and so is this one. So here the structure is 2, 2. In general, the structure can be a product of any number of cycles of any sort of length. For example, we can take another example. In this set itself, say we consider the function 1 goes to 2, 2 goes to 3, 3 goes to 1, and 4 goes to 4. For this permutation, if we start with 1, then image of 1 is 2, image of 2 is 3. Since image of 3 is again 1, so we end it here. And 4 of course goes to 4, so we write like this. So this is a 3 cycle, the first one, and this is a 1 cycle. So here the cycle structure is 3, 1, and it's not necessary that you should always have only 2 cycles. You may have more than 2 cycles and their products are taken. So you can see one thing, that when you express a permutation as a product of cycles, the cycles are disjoint in the sense that the symbols appearing in one cycle do not appear in any other cycle. Now this is the fact that we will see in section 211, that when you take a permutation and you form, say this is one permutation, and you form a conjugate of that permutation by multiplying by g in this manner, forming such a product, then you get a conjugate of the original b. This operation does not change. Of course it will change everything, it will change the permutation, it will change the cycles, but what is important is that this operation of changing b to gb g inverse does not change the cycle structure. So if you, for example, say this is your D and this is your A, if one performs dA D inverse, then in dA D inverse also you will, if you find its cycles, you will see that you end up with a product of 2 cycles. So that cycle structure is unchanged. Okay, so that thing we are going to use here. So in section 210, where we study permutations only more closely, we come to know about many more things about the symmetric groups. So from section 211 we know that any conjugate of an element in F must have the cycle decomposition, cycle structure or cycle decomposition, same thing. Okay, but why are we talking about conjugates and these things? It's because when you will try to see whether F is normal in G, you would do what? You would consider an element from G and you would consider an element from F, and you will form this element which actually is a conjugate of F, and you would want to know whether this belongs to F or not. If any such product belongs to F, then we can say that, oh sorry, EF, yeah, okay, so this is F. So if this happens, then we can say that F is normal in G. So this piece of information tells us that when we are forming such conjugates, then the cycle structure is unchanged, and you can see that in F we actually have all the elements of that cycle structure, 2, 2, all possible elements, all possible permutations with that cycle structure. These are the only permutations with 2, 2 cycle structure. And we write that since F consists of precisely all the permutations in G having the cycle decomposition 2, 2 we must have GFG inverse in F for every G belonging to G and F belonging to F, because this is a permutation of the cycle structure 2, 2. Any of its conjugate will also be one such permutation, but F has all such permutations, so this conjugate will also have to be in F. Hence F is normal in G. One can also show this directly by performing that off-field calculation, where one calculates all such conjugates by considering all the possibilities of small g from S4, because the number of elements in S4 is finite, so one can do that. However, you need to calculate many things for that, and it will look ugly also if you try to write that in a solution form. So this one is much better. However, here we have to use a result which appears much later in the book. That is not a problem. So we can get the solution like this. But we now also have to show that E is normal in F, F is normal in G, but E is not normal in G. That's what we need. And the reason is this. If you consider, you see, this is the permutation D that we considered there a little while ago. That is this permutation. Usually when we have a single cycle, a one cycle, we don't write it, because if there are 4 symbols, this cycle tells you that the image of 1 is 2, the image of 2 is 3, and the image of 3 is 1. And the one symbol that we are not writing, it's assumed that the image of that symbol is the symbol itself, that is 4 has the image 4 itself. So it's this function. If you take the product of this with A and then its inverse, then this becomes equal to B, and B clearly does not belong to E. Hence, E is not normal in G. I want you to at least go through the calculations that we have just simply said this is true, this is like that, and see that the calculations are true. Now you know what the meaning of these symbols are, so you will be able to calculate the left hand side and see that it's actually equal to B. Next, exercise 15. If n is normal in G, and A belonging to G is of order O of A, which is finite. So that means A is an element in G of finite order. Prove that the order M of the coset NA in the quotient group G by N is a divisor of order of A. Let us raise the coset to this power OA. By the definition of the binary operation we have in G by N, this is equal to N A to the power OA. Keep in mind that order of A, by definition, when it is finite, by definition is a positive integer. Now A to the power order of A is identity, and since N is a subgroup and E belongs to N, so this product, this coset is equal to N. So now you look at this equation. The equation looks like this. Or in other words, this is some element in the group G by N, and this is the identity element of G by N. That is, it looks like this. Now when you have such an equation, we have already seen in exercise 36 of section 2.5 that in this case the order of G will divide this exponent. So the order of NA has to divide order of A. So that's why we write, so by exercise 36 of section 2.5, M, which is the order of NA, divides order of A. And that's what we wanted to show. And let's solve one more. If N is a normal subgroup in the finite group G, in the finite group G such that the index of N in G and the order of N are relatively prime. Then show that any element X in G satisfying X to the power order of N equal to E must be in N. So we are now given a finite group G, and in it there is a normal subgroup N such that its index and order are relatively prime. Now under this condition, if we take an element from G whose order of nth power turns out to be equal to the identity element in G, then that element X must be in N. We have to show this. Okay, so first we will exploit the relative primality of these two numbers, since the GCD of the index and the order of n is equal to 1, there exist integers m and n such that plus n times order of n equal to 1. Such a linear combination will be equal to 1. This comes from relative primality of these two numbers. Now let X be an element of G such that X to the power order of n is equal to identity. Then we consider the coset nx. Nx can be written as nx to the power 1, and in place of 1 we can write this. So this will be equal to nx to the power m times index of n in G plus n times order of n. Now use the rules of exponent and write this element as this: nx to the power index of n in G to the power m times nx to the power order of n to the power n. Now in the first factor you look at this power nx to the power ign. Nx is a coset of n in G, and hence it's an element in this quotient group, and the index of n in G is actually the order of this quotient group. So if you raise nx to this power, then this will be equal to the identity element of G by n, and this comes from the second corollary to Lagrange's theorem. So the first factor will be n to the power m, and this one, if you calculate by applying the binary operation in G by n, this one will be equal to x to the power order of n to the power n. Since n is the identity element in G by n, this becomes n, and this From this condition, this becomes NE. So this one will vanish and we will have, so that is equal to N. So that means Nx has been equal to N. So this proves that x must belong to N, because in Nx you have elements of the form small n x, where small n is an element of capital N. In place of that small n, you just choose identity, you get x. So x belongs to Nx, so that's why x has to belong to N. So here the solution ends. There are a few other problems in this set of exercises that we will solve in the next video. So with this I end this video, and so that will be all for tonight. This is me, Lucifer, from A Mathematical Room. Have a nice night.